You know, some people leave behind a legacy, but others, they leave behind a ghost. Emiliano Zapata was a revolutionary whose ideas were so powerful, so non-negotiable, that well over a century after his death, they still haunt and inspire Mexico. So that brings up a wild question.
And that's exactly what we're going to dig into here. We're going to see how Zapata's fight for land and liberty didn't just stop when he was assassinated. Nope, it actually became a blueprint for resistance, a kind of cycle of rebellion that seems to repeat itself anytime the lessons of the past are forgotten. So to really get Zapata, you have to understand the crisis that made him. Picture this, it's late 19th century Mexico, and it's under the thumb of an authoritarian president, Porfirio Diaz. His government was all about this aggressive modernization, but it had a devastating and totally deliberate consequence for the country's rural people. Just look at this number, 95%. By 1910, right on the edge of the Mexican Revolution, a staggering 95% of Mexico's rural population owned no land at all. We're talking about 10 million people left with nothing. So how on earth did it get that bad?
Well, it was all very systematic. The government pushed through policies, like a land law in 1894, that basically made it incredibly easy for these huge private estates, they were called haciendas, to just swallow up communal lands. There was no limit on how much land one person could own, so this was pretty much a state-approved transfer of wealth on a massive scale. Something like 5,000 indigenous communities lost their land, and for them, trying to appeal it in court was completely useless against the power of the rich elite.
And this is where Emiliano Zapata steps onto this scene. He wasn't some big-shot politician or an academic, he was a farmer from the state of Morelos. Back in 1909, his village elected him to try and legally get their stolen land back. But when the governor just turned him away, that was the breaking point. It proved the system was completely broken and that the only option left was to fight. And here's what made Zapata's fight so incredibly radical. He wasn't just asking for land reform or for the government to hand out land. His core, non-negotiable demand was restitution. This wasn't about asking the state for a favor. It was about taking back what had been stolen. A completely different idea.
He laid this all out in his famous manifesto, the Plan de Ayala. In it, he completely broke with the revolutionary president Madero, who he felt had sold them out by focusing on politics instead of the land issue. The plan demanded the immediate return of stolen lands, the seizure of large estates, and it was a direct call for the people to rise up, armed and ready. It was basically a declaration of war against the entire power structure.
And all these big ideas got boiled down into one powerful motto: land and liberty. It was a crystal clear statement that, hey, political freedom means nothing if you don't have economic freedom, and that comes from owning the very land you work.
Okay, so here's the great paradox of Zapata's story. Militarily, his movement was eventually cornered and defeated. He himself was lured into a trap and assassinated in 1919. But his ideas were so popular, so deeply felt by the people, that you literally couldn't kill them. They forced their way right into Mexico's new constitution.
You can really see the clash of visions here. Zapata's plan was radical. Give the land back now, no payment to the old owners, and let the revolutionaries enforce it. But what actually ended up in the Constitution was, well, a compromise. The state took control of the process, and it offered payment, or indemnification, to the old landowners. In a way, Zapata's revolutionary fire was captured and sort of tamed by the new government.
The result of that compromise was the ejido system. The government started creating these collective land grants for peasant communities. And here's the crucial part. This land was inalienable. That means it couldn't be sold, it couldn't be mortgaged. For over 70 years, this system, a direct result of Zapata's struggle, protected rural communities from the very market forces that had taken their land in the first place. But that protection was not going to last. Decades later, a whole new economic way of thinking started sweeping the globe, and it saw this revolutionary promise not as a victory for the people, but as an obstacle to progress.
That hard-won victory from 1917 was slowly, piece by piece, undone. In 1991, as the government was getting ready to sign the NAFTA trade agreement, it reformed Article 27, stripping away its most important protection. For the first time in decades, it was now legal to sell ejido land. And then, on January 1, 1994, the very day NAFTA kicked in, history started to echo, loudly.
Because on that exact same day, The ghost of the revolution walked again. A brand new movement emerged from the mountains of southern Mexico, and they took Zapata's name, his cause, and his famous motto for their own.
Yeah, the timing was absolutely not a coincidence. The Zapatista Army of National Liberation, the EZLN, saw the changes to Article 27 and the start of NAFTA as nothing short of a death sentence for indigenous communities, a terrifying return to the old days of dispossession. Their rebellion was a direct answer to what they saw as a massive betrayal.
And what was their rallying cry? You guessed it, the exact same one from nearly a century before: land and liberty. The new Zapatistas were making it perfectly clear. We are the direct heirs of Emiliano Zapata, and we are fighting the same fight, just against new forces.
And right here, the pattern just snaps into focus. Back in the Porfiriato era, you have a push for modernization. That leads to land laws, which leads to mass dispossession, which sparks Zapata's rebellion. Fast forward a few decades to the neoliberal era, all about free markets and global trade. And you have constitutional reform in NAFTA, creating the risk of a new dispossession. And the result? The EZLN rebellion. It is the same fundamental conflict, just playing out in a different century.
Which brings us to our final lingering question. The story of Zapata, and then the Zapatistas, seems to suggest that a revolution isn't just a thing that happens in a history book. It's a promise. And when a promise that deep is broken, its ghost will always come back, demanding justice. It really makes you wonder, what other ghosts of history are just out there waiting for their moment to rise again?